So this was my detective search, and I'm gonna do this one by section. So our first section started here. This was actually our start line, and our start line went from about here to about here. So basically this opening, and of course the whole search went, the boundary went from the wall to the wall. The first challenge that I offered was in this hallway, and it was a line puzzle. So it was a 2-hide line puzzle. They were same odor, both birch, and they were one on this picture on the base right here, and then the second one was on the base right here. And with the way our airflow was, we had a beautiful line going straight down this wall, catching all up in this lost and found, and then a lot of the dogs were actually sourcing this or working it and starting to try to get to source from the start line. So from here, a lot of dogs actually caught it, dove into this corner, worked it, came all the way around, and then hit our first hide. Now the other side of that coin were the handlers that started with their dog on the opposite side of them, and or dogs that just naturally wanted to do the other side of our search area. Those dogs tended to cut this whole section off, and if they got this, they got it when they came back. They'd typically come in and they'd either get this hide or they'd go one of the other directions we're about to do. And if they got this one, they'd either get it off this chair or they would pass it, dive into this alcove that's right here, and they'd work it from this alcove back. All right, so that was our first challenge, was the line hide, both birch. Our second challenge was in this piece of our hallway. And this one was a little bit deeper. It wasn't a true deep, but it was still pretty deep. It was all the way back, it was underneath the table, and all the way back here. And this hide, actually it was more like here. And this hide was typically worked from this part of the table, and they were able to work it back and around, or on the other side, they would go to the opposite side of the wall, they'd work it, they'd arc around into this desk. They'd work this desk, dive into this little section right here, and then this was actually the clearest line to source, is straight off this desk into this corner. So that was that one. Now our next area was in this room. So this whole room was hot, and I only had one hide in here. Now the one hide that was in here, however, was really tall. It was all the way up here, right? I'm actually standing on my tippy toes. So to put it up here, it was tall up here, and there's actually airflow that's coming from the vent, pushing along the top of this, and then blowing out the top of this. And part of what this caused was it to drop straight down and give me a beautiful line, and most dogs actually got it right here. And they'd work kind of the bracket from like here to here, and they'd have a clear picture and be able to alert here. With that said, however, this also, with the airflow coming across and pushing, caused a second thing, and that was for handlers to think there was more than one hide in here. And the reason they thought that is because of the way the dogs worked the room. They had a really clear picture in the corner, but when they were out here, they just had odor, and it was bouncing off everything. It was collecting on handles, it was bouncing off the wall, it was collecting on that door, it was falling all over this stuff. Leashes were getting wrapped around and around all these items while the dogs were trying to work every nook and crevice. It was trapping on this, it was especially trapping on the top of this. We even had dogs thinking that it was over here and trying to communicate something in this area. So a huge challenge in here wasn't actually to find the high hide, it was to recognize that the high hide was the only hide in this area. So after that, we came this way. Again, we've already kind of discussed this alcove. There was nothing in it, but it was really interesting how even though this line hide was pushing very solidly back toward our start line, we had a beautiful separate line to the one that was closer to us from this alcove. So they'd get, the ones that hadn't got this yet could get it from in this alcove and work back around the corner. So from there, we would go through this door. This door was actually open. It was propped open the whole time. And this space was blank. So I wanted people, the challenge here was to recognize that even though this was a nice, fun spot to hunt, that didn't mean it had odor. So there was no odor in this space. There was lots of items, there was lots of things, there was lots of interesting things, no odor. So it's just a really interesting nook and crevice area for the dogs to work. From there, we would come out into this little alcove area. Again, no odor. I wanted them to recognize I didn't have anything in here. The dogs just needed to know, like, hey, I'm here, there's nothing here, good to go. All right. Then we went into our exterior. And our exterior piece only had one hide in it. Only had one hide in it. And that hide was a crack hide that was right here. So I used the crack and then I helped camouflage it a little bit and contain and control. I wanted to stabilize it because I knew it'd be in the sun part of the time. So I actually used this. However, even though these normally make it so odor doesn't escape very well at all, with just how beautiful and open this crack is, what it actually did was help contain and channel the odor to give a nice, clear picture. And this was sourceable off of the trash can over here, and then a bunch of dogs actually worked it out here, and we got that nice spinning in a cloud of odor behavior where they spin around and then they work and bam, they hit it. So that was really nice. With that said, there were no other hides out here, but we did have some fun things for handlers to search. So our boundary went basically from the corner of the metal post, and then it went all the way up, came across, and then I cut at an angle. The angle came across. There was some weird mystery thing that happened here between the time I set my hides and the time we came out to do a handler briefing. So this got cut off. We never figured out what the sticky thing was, but it's obviously still there. So that's fascinating mystery if anybody knows. Came straight across, and then we made a line keeping this inside. We went to the second, between this bed and the far bed, then went to the road and followed that around, and then came back up with our brick half wall being our boundary for that side. And there was nothing else out here. I will also say that this little rock flower thing that was in the search area, I told them that there was nothing in it. Part of the reason I told them there was nothing in it is because my demo dog found some tiny little pieces of bread that had probably been thrown in there by school children. So I decided we don't need to search that unless you really want to. So I let people know there was nothing in there. I didn't put anything there. So that was my detective. Our challenges were a line hide, a deep hide, a high hide, blanks, and a crack. And I really think that this was a fantastic space to have fun with. I think my favorite spot was my blank, actually. Anyway, happy hunting.